Good morning, Mark 2. Is that any better? If not, then we'll just see how we go. Let me know if it's working okay. Please. Hi, Helen. Is there any improvement? Any better? Any worse? Please. Okay. A fuzzy morning it is then between us. Okay, when do we get 4 or 5? Hi, George. Good morning to you. The picture's a bit fuzzy today. Okay, thanks, Helen. Picture's a bit fuzzy today. I've got Wi-Fi issues. So I'll wait for 2 or 3 more to come back online and we'll get started. So sorry about the delay. Just the Wi-Fi is playing up today. It's a foul morning here. Absolutely chucking it down. Awful, really. Golf course looks good, though. Well rested after a week or 2, or 10 days, I suppose. We'll get started in a second. So we just had to close down the live stream a second ago to see if the picture would improve by opening up again, but I'm not sure it's any better. Alrighty. Okay, 1 more minute. See if everyone else can link back in. Then we'll get started. I was going to do this outside, but when I did a test outside, it sounded like I was on the deck of a Harrier jump jet, a ship or something. The noise from the wind interference is huge. Alrighty. Well, a very good morning to you. Thanks ever so much for joining me in this non-lockdown lockdown. My high street where I live in Teddington is absolutely packed. Really strange. Cigar shops open, cafes open. Anyway, we are where we are, and I hope you're all keeping fit and healthy. So we're going to talk about swing length today. A very easy thing to look at one-dimensionally, but there's lots and lots of ways we can measure swing length. There's lots of interesting ways in which we can measure it. And the most obvious way is when we look at the length of a swing like that. What's its length at the top? So there's John Rahm, who is now my current bet to win the Masters. I really fancy him to do it. Such a strong physical man. But look, that's the total length of his swing there. If I go flick to Bubba Watson, a 2-time Masters champion, you can then see the length of his swing. And there's a massive difference. I'm going to try and flick between the two now. It's actually 180 degrees if you look at it, more or less, give or take. Look at that. Incredible. So you've got 2 guys there who are swinging the shaft of the club head in 180 degrees of difference, and yet hitting the ball more or less the same distance, hitting the ball with more or less exactly the same club head speed. So it then leads us to the question, why is swing length important? Well, it's very individual. Everybody's swing length is their own. I know Richard Williams hopefully is still tuned in. And Rich has gone from a 14 handicap this year to a 9 handicap, 9.4. And his swing is one of the shortest I've ever seen. And he took it right in here and swung the club no more than that on the way back. And there's not a torque professional in the world who could generate power from there to optimize their distance that they hit the ball. So we're very much not just lengthening his swing, but lifting it higher. And so the length of the swing is dependent on the line or the plane of the swing. If I swing the club head very quickly behind me here, I get stuck. I can't swing it any further. If I swing the club head from here up, I'm not necessarily swinging further, I'm swinging more upright, and of course I can't help but swing further. So swing length is a very, very easy thing to misinterpret. And also, what's the length that the club head travels on? That's the true length of a golf swing. If I take the club head from here and lift it to the top, that's a straight line up and down. If I do it from this angle here, it's still the same straight line, but with width in the swing, that creates real power. Now, I know George is watching, and this is one thing you and I have worked on, George. Your swing, if we're trying to swing the club along this line or to this line, if we swing the club from here to here, we shorten that swing dramatically. That's why we actually struggle to get power when we swing on this line. By swinging the club on a straighter line, it actually lengthens the swing. The more we go in here, the more short we swing. We've got no room. As I swing the club behind me here too much, my right elbow gets tucked in and trapped here. I've got no room to swing. Look at the big players. They stretch the club out on quite a straight line on the way back, slightly on the inside, and that right arm gives them full width. Now look at this length in my swing. Now look at the width in my swing. And the length of the swing, and the width of the swing, and the plane of the swing all have to harmonize. So going back to these pictures here now, let's talk about range, because if you look at let's work from the ground up. Look at the knee action there compared to there. Bubba's got a lot more flex in his knees, and this knee here, his right knee, I'll get that right. His right knee is kicking right in, whereas Rahm keeps his knees pretty much the same distance apart. So Rahm's remarkable. There's only a couple of players in history who've swung with that limited amount of range. Rahm goes from here to here. He's incredibly strong and physically built, and as he comes through, boy, does he get moving on the way through. So he's one of the very few players who swings the club on a short range. The other was a chap called Dan Pole, who nearly won the Masters in 1980-something. Again, an incredibly short swing. Most players swing for length. And if you look at the very long hitters through time, Nicklaus had a long swing. There's a very interesting video of Nicklaus giving Gary Player a lesson. I'll send it on to you. I'll put the link in. And players giving hitting balls, hitting it great. Now the Masters this week, Gary Player hit a pretty substantial drive down the first hole at Augusta, 85 years of age. Anyway, only a month ago they were giving each other a lesson. And Nicklaus is looking at players' swing. They're talking about swing length. And Nicklaus does this. He says, "Hey, you know, Gary, in '62 when I won the Open, I watched a video the other day. My swing length was that. In '72 when I won the US Open again, my swing length was that. He said, I can't believe how much range I had." And so 10 years in age, his swing got longer. So the length of the swing depends on lots of different things, your physicality, your range, illness, injury, all that sort of thing. And Nicklaus, I was reading one of his books the other night, he was talking about how his weight would go up and down by 10 pounds in the off season. He put on a lot of weight, and that lengthened his swing. He got stronger, he got bigger. Now, we don't have to look at Bryson DeChambeau right now to look at the physicality of these players now, and it was interesting to see what's going to happen there. So, Richard Williams, we've got two high in. Sorry you missed the first 6 minutes. We started at 10:08, 10:09, so you're 6 minutes in. Oh, better than that. Oh, good. So the Wi-Fi is working better. So there's two Richard Williams who I've been teaching of late, both of whom had the same error. Swing the club very much inside here, and because they went inside here, the swing was too short. So the whole point about the length of the swing and how far the club head travels, and I'm going to talk about Ian Chapman's swing in a second and Helen's swing in a second, the length the club travels, the more speed it develops. Now, if we look back at Rahm's picture here, now how does he generate all that power? He's one of the very few guys who gets power from here, bang, and it's a real smack, a really physical smack. When we look at Bubba Watson's swing, there's much more range, length, leverage, arc, all the sort of science points are used much more in a more orthodox fashion. And it's much easier for the likes of us, the humans, the non-gods of golf, to develop power in the same way that Bubba Watson does, increasing the length of the swing, increasing the arc of the swing. So then we look at different lengths in the swing. So you've often heard me talk about race. Close this door, so the air traffic noise coming in. What creates that range in the swing, as we talked about before, is this movement to the right side, or for you, Ian, as a lefty, this movement to the left side coming this way. And this week's recording, you see I posted a picture of Ian at the top of the swing, and all we worked on there is creating a huge amount of range in the body here. So as his body moves out in the way, he's got all the space in the world to swing to. Because the range has put you to there, we know that once it goes beyond parallel, it's hard to control. We then get into what's called a piccolo grip. If that club swings too far, the length is too far, as we swing, the hands let go. It's that piccolo position. Now, when you look at junior members, or when you look at lady golfers who haven't got much strength in their hands when they swing too far, it's not because they've moved their body around too far, it's because their hands have sort of let go of the club. And the club flops out of position onto the shoulder here. And that's a bad thing. So this is when we start talking about the position of the hands. How does the hands position limit, control, and create swing length? This is why we place, for the most part, our thumbs on top of the handle. Now, one or two of you will move your hands across or your thumbs across to different positions. But if the thumbs are on top of the handle, it means at the top of the swing, we have some support. And that's how you control swing length. Now, again, looking at Jack Nicklaus, Nicklaus spent his entire career, right from being a teenager, with his right thumb off the handle at the top. He said that when he swung up to the top, he couldn't help it. It was just sort of a tick he had. Look at all the famous photographs of Nicklaus. His right thumb isn't supporting the handle. We then look at that right hand position. If his thumb's off the handle, just look at how little of his hand's actually on the handle. So he's effectively gripping that club, and I can't really do it, in the base of 3 fingers. So it just shows how strong these guys are. Nicklaus's grips as well on his clubs when they were made of leather, he preferred them shiny. So he'd let them sort of rot a little bit. He wouldn't put any sticky, we used to put olive oil onto the clubs to make them sticky. Leather handle grips, we'd sort of wash them, rough them up a little bit with sandpaper, then put olive oil on the handle to make them a bit sticky. It would soak in liver stickiness. He didn't like that, so his grips were incredibly smooth. Now, for you and I, if we were to pick that club up and swing it, it'd fly out of our hands. I've held them. Fly out of your hands. You need to have such strong hands. So I think there's an abnormality in the strength of these people. There's certainly an abnormality in how strong John Rahm is. I'll do that out of the light for you. I mean, to create the 320-yard drives that he does from that position there, there's an abnormal amount of strength in there. So then we start talking about the range of the swing. How far the right side goes behind us, how far the chest and body opens up as a result of the right side going behind us, creates a lovely position for our arc and our levers to swing into here. If I keep my body still, I get stuck. I can't go anywhere. They open up my body, look at the length of the swing improvement. So if you're looking to lengthen your swing, and most of us should be looking to lengthen our swing, particularly as we get older, it's all about getting that right side out of the way. Create that space there. You heard me say this 6 months ago when we first started doing all this together. If we start that right foot withdrawn a bit, I've already increased the amount which my body turns. I've already made an early body turn. Look. That's neutral to my target. I pull back here now. I'm now in a position where I've created more range and turn. So I spend an awful lot of my time saying to people, just take a bit further right foot. We pull that right foot a little back, pull it back here. I know that will increase their range of their body, and therefore the length of their swing is optimized. And again, it's very easy for me as a coach, and lots of pros say this, to sort of neglect people's hand position. Sort of, let's talk about the swing. And yet the hand position will control that swing length anyway. Remember I said about the thumbs under the handle. So there's a very fascinating bit of footage when Woodsy was the Masters champion in 1991. He went to what was then a high-tech school at one of the universities, I think it was Liverpool somewhere, and they did loads of tests on how far he moves his body, and he realised he was losing distance by overturning his body, creating too much range on the way back. And so why is that? Why would more turn, more leverage, more range lessen his power? We're now going to talk about the play. What Woodsy found out by overturning was that he put his club in a position at the top which didn't point to the back of the ball. And so as he came down, he put an oblique or glancing blow on the ball and therefore lost distance. Remember, oblique is weak in golf, where all the time we are looking for that smack at the back of the ball. Should the club come from too flat a position into the ball, the clap is weak. It's an oblique strike on the ball. So what he found by turning less or moving his body less, decreasing his range and bringing it back in, he got more of a solid smack at the back of the ball because his swing was on plane. Watch me here. If I swing to an optimal position at the top, which is square and the correct length of swing, if I overturn now, my club shaft is pointing somewhere over there, and that puts me in a position not to strike the ball squarely. So you wonder why the game's so damn difficult. You've got to combine the length of the swing, which is dependent on the plane of the swing. The plane of the swing then determines your position at the top. The plane of the swing is also dependent on the width of the swing, how much range you've got in the body and where you can push your hands and arms to. So the world's best players, for the most part, if you take a bell curve, they're mostly doing that. They've got the outliers either side. For the most part, swing the club on plane or high of plane, and they swing it on the longer side of the swing. So I'm going to talk to you. One of my favorite things, I discovered this about 2 years ago now. Talk about the length of the swing, blah, blah, blah. And Steve Elkington was talking about, and he's got a beautiful, just look at Steve Elkington's swing. I mean, he's a big physical man, 6'2", heavy, thick set, everything about him is strong. And Elkington talked about getting to the top of the swing, and his signature character move was going to the top here, and then taking his club from there out here before he brought it down. And that move is very common in tour pros. They go to here, and the club seems to move this way. And the interviewer said to me, so what's the deal with the move? I said, well, think about it. It's making my swing longer. And I sat there watching and thinking, well, how does that make the swing longer? Because one-dimensionally, with one-dimensional thinking, that's the length of the swing. Surely that'll make the swing longer. The length of the swing that Elkinson's talking about is how many feet and inches it travels on before it returns to the ball. So now we're going to talk about motion, not just positions. If that club head travels from here up to the top here, and let's say that's about 6, 12, 18 foot of motion, just for argument's sake, 18 foot of motion. If I bring it down on the same line, that's 36 foot, 18 up, 18 down. What Elkington's saying is if I go up to here, 18, add 3 feet, still got 18 to come down. So he's now got 3 foot more in his swing. What does that give him? It gives him more momentum. And that is why we don't start the golf swing from the top of the backswing here. And I've been asked that question 100 times in lessons. Oh, why don't we just start from up here? Because we're only up there for 0.00 of a second somewhere. I mean, it's a very, very brief amount of time. It's called a position. It's not really a position because it's such a brief moment in the swing. So I take photographs of that position in your swing and say, well, here's where you reach at the top there. Because as you swing up the top, the club stops very briefly before it changes direction. It's not in continual motion. It has a minimal stop there. So it is an element of the swing we can measure quite quickly. So this is why we then look at people like Matt Wolff, who takes the club out here. Because the Romans told us, didn't they? The shortest point between A and B is a straight line. So why not take on a circuitous line out here? Because I'm adding a lot of range, motion, and momentum before I arrive here. Now, if we all arrive at the same position here before we hit the ball, but my club has got on a much longer journey, I develop more momentum in my swing before I get there. Therefore, my club has got more power as it moves into the ball. And that's why some very elegant looking swings hit the ball so far. Because the club head's in motion. An inelegant swing, and you know who you are if you're out there, an inelegant swing is short and it's fast. And it's a grip and it's tight. And it's tension, it's sort of adrenaline rush. So we go from here, rip the club back. It's not swinging, it's not in momentum. You look at Montgomery. Everything Montgomery did was sort of loose and floppy. He sort of pulled his club out of his bag and he'd hang his arms down, and the way he walked, everything was loose. He would take the club from here, and instead of taking it back on our normal line, which 90% of pros do, he pushed it out there. And I'm talking right out there. Then when he got to the top here, he let it flop down. So he had a huge, big, imagine a paintbrush. He was making like a big, sweeping paintbrush stripe. He's going to paint something, he'd take it right out there and over here. So his club, by the time it got to this position here, had taken the longest, widest journey possible to get up there. And then when he got to the top, everything slotted into place. Okay, let me just get my list of notes back. So the very famous golfer called Jimmy Brune, who won the British Amateur back in the 50s. And back then, winning the Amateur was still considered a major championship, a bit like playing cricket for Oxford or Cambridge was considered first-class cricket. Winning the Amateur was a big thing back in the 50s. So Bobby Jones, who retired at the age of 29, won 30 majors in 8 years. He then finished his career at set up Augusta National. Jones remained an amateur all his life, and so he played in all the professional events and won them of the day, but he also won the British Amateur, the US Amateur, and was considered a major champion. So Jimmy Bruin was a very famous Irishman, and everyone called his swing the Bruin loop. And he was the originator of all this. So he'd take it right out here, like this, lengthen his arc and swing, get up to here, and then drop it down and just look like a normal swing from there. But he knew by lengthening the swing, rather than just focusing on that one-dimensional measurement of the swing, what's the length of the swing? The length of the swing is the length of journey, how many feet and inches it travels on before it meets the ball. And that's why very big, very tall players with long levers can create more energy and more power, because their arc is wider, arc is bigger. The club head travels on many more feet and inches before it gets to come back and strike the ball. So then we start getting to a few contradictions, which I really like in golf, because you've heard me talk about constants and variables. If we know that the longest, widest swing hits the ball most powerfully, then we look at someone like Cabrera, Lee Westwood, Nick Faldo, very powerful players, who will bend their arm. So they sacrificed width in their swing. The club must have traveled on a slightly narrower, smaller, shorter journey or arc because they bent that elbow. So why would they do that? Because that elbow bend gave them more leverage, more leverage. And so there's many different ways of doing it. And this is why the game is so wonderful, because what's constant in someone's game is not a constant for someone else. Look at Brooks Koepka. He gets the golf ball with a bent left arm because he dips down and keeps himself onto the ball there. But again, that's a quirk from being a young man. He did that as a kid. So we then talk about what's the length of swings, the optimal length of swings for all your clubs. So if I take a 3-wood here, that can be long. We want range because we do know, remember, the longer we swing, the more power we get, the further the ball flies. If the golf course is then shorter, the game is then easier. For your mid-irons, you want a bit more control, sort of 6, 7, 8 irons and what have you. So what should I do here now? If I put the club into my butt, the butt of the club into my tummy here, and turn back like this. That's the arc of my swing. I'm not changing it or corrupting it or shortening it. As I go back to here, a little cock of the wrists, and that's plenty of golf swing for you. That as a lockdown exercise is a fabulous one. Watch me here. If you can practice something at home, okay, one for you now on the left, Ian. Get the club butt into sort of just above your belly button. Here, go back to there, bit of wrist cock, and that with a bit of motion is plenty of swing for a mid-iron. I would typically try and get people to be very much on plane with their shorter irons and their shorter clubs, but keep the swing a little on the short side. Now, I know Helen's watching, and we lengthened Helen's swing. It's quite interesting because Ian and Helen, when you both came back from lockdown, and Quentin Roby, quite a few of you came back and swung, I thought, a hell of a lot better. Gene Halliday as well came back and had a lesson and just all of a sudden hit the ball further. And one of the funniest things I've had at the club for the past since lockdown is how many members have come up to me and said, "Oh, I love that. I love that motion. It's great. I've been doing it in the lockdown." And it's been great fun for me. I've established some very good new friendships at the club anyway, through lockdown, or through the cause of lockdown. But so many members now have got this range of motion. And I think it just opened up people's ideas of saying, okay, well, I can do that. That's easy. If I can do that, then I can do that. If I can do that, then I can do that. Why not put a club in my hand and do it all together? And that's what's creating the range in the swing. So when Helen came back, looking at the videos that we did together just a couple of nights ago, typically swings about there, trying to be controlled and trying to be in a good position. We lengthened the swing by increasing the range of the body. Got up to here, and of course hit the ball so much further and so much higher. It was great. Okay, so when I talk about all the elements, balancing the elements of the swing, when I talk about balancing the need for the arc, the width, the range, the motion, the momentum, the best analogy I can give you is a chocolate cake isn't just made of chocolate. It needs many, many more ingredients. And it's all about balancing those ingredients in your golf swing. And so our job as professionals, when we look at you and we look at your swing, is saying, okay, well, is this a width issue? Is it an arc issue? Is the arc staying constant? Is this a plane issue, or is it a swing length issue? And I can tell you now, through my career of teaching people, early on when I'm giving lessons, saying, oh, they're overswinging, they're swinging too short. I should really have worked on their plane before I worked on the length of their swing. So I'm going to talk about chipping and putting length now. I'm not going to put you in the room here, but just bear with me. If you're struggling for a distance control on the putting green, a great exercise for you is to make the width of your stance narrow, medium, and wide. And if you put your feet close together, narrow stance, and the putter head only travels back as far as the right foot here. For you, Ian, as a lefty, only as far back as the left foot. And that then controls the length of the swing over a 4 or 5 foot putt. If I then want to sort of go to a medium distance stance, well, what is a medium distance? I would say the ankles are just inside the width of my shoulders. The putter and the ball start opposite my left big toe. As I go back to right foot, that of course gives me a 10 or 15 foot putt, a medium distance putt. And then for the long ones, same starting position, but the right foot pushes out. I can then lengthen my swing out to that right foot and give the ball a bit more of a roll, a bit more distance. It's a very simple exercise that, and I use it all the time when I'm struggling for a bit of feel for distance on the greens, which we all do from time to time. But that control of the 3 different stances there, when I try it with people and show them it, typically there's one of them where they sort of, might be the short one, where the putter goes miles outside the right foot, and it tells them everything. What's typically happening is that the length of their putting swing would be more or less the same if they had a 3 foot putt, a 10 foot putt, or a 40 foot putt. They're going back a very, very long way. Now, in terms of chipping length, as long as, for most of you, the club travels back a third and through 2/3, you'll be okay at chipping. The worst chipping actions I see are when people are rigid and trying to do equal measurement either side, because whilst the intention there is an okay intention, what typically happens in practice is back there and get stuck. If you think 1/3 back, 2/3 through, that club keeps moving. And if it keeps moving, it won't get stuck in the ground. As long as it's traveling forwards all the time, you'd be a reasonable chipper. Down to the ground, slide on the ground and move forwards. 1/3, 2/3. Alrighty, so quite a lot of information there jammed into a shortish session. I'm running out of battery power, I'm afraid. I've still got about 30%. So are there any questions about what I've talked about? And hopefully be able to see what we look at when we're looking at you and looking at ourselves, or when we're measuring your swing and we're looking at the Tour Pro swings. We're trying to balance the need for width, arc, range, plane, all those different things, and measure the swing from several different dimensions. There's great footage of Bobby Jones, again, one of the great heroes of the game, who retired very young. And Bobby Jones had this enormous body turn around here, and he put the club very much out of position. So the club travelled a long way over his neck, i.e. long, and pointed a long way to the right of target. Then what he'd do, get to the top here, the club would be inverted commas out of position relative to the target line there. Then what he'd do is he'd move it back down to the ball, he'd turn himself back into position and then bring the club down. All done at breakneck speed, obviously, but up to here, turn back to position, so he's on plane now and down. So if I do that with a bit more sort of shape in my positioning now, up, huge position around here, turn back, and then down. An incredible golfer, terrible angler as well. Alrighty, so any questions about what we talked about there? Are there different lengths of clubs? How you regulate the length of your the club swinging back? Anything else which you want to talk about? Because what we do know is that the longest careers in golf have always had long swings. Tom Watson should have won the Open in 2009. He won his first one in 1975. Think of that. That's a hell of a long career that he's been at the top of the game. Watson always had a long swing. He allowed his left elbow to bend. He allowed the club to go around here. From this dimension of measurement here, Watson would swing, and remarkably, he'd keep the club slightly what we call across the line that way. And again, going back to what I talked about with Bobby Jones, he'd bring it back down on plane to the ball here. And that's what makes those guys incredible. This was all pre-video footage, all pre-camera work. They put the club out of position, and then they'd find position on the way down. So when we talk about the arc and the range, why you won't see very, very very few pros possibly have the club slightly behind them here. They all take it wide out there. Is that they instinctively know, hang on, there's a bit more yardage out there because my club's traveling on more feet and inches to get to the top of the swing here. We know traveling to here limits that length of the swing. What we know is that the pros on the way back have a 9-inch spread on average. The vast majority of pros are within 9 inches of each other on the way back, and that will mean the most extreme will be, say, 8 inches that way. That'd be 8 inches away, 0 inches, and then 1 inch inside here. So 8 inches outside, level, 1 inch inside. Very, very, very few level that way. So if they're mostly going that way, on the return to the ball, though, they're all within 3 inches of each other. They all know where the plane of the swing is, down here. And you try, look at that there, that image I'm making there. My arm going over my shoulder, my hand going over my shoulder and slapping. Can't do it from here. I'm trapped. So short and flat go hand in hand. Do you shorten the backswing when playing in high winds? I never read that as high heels, then, actually. Do you shorten the backswing when playing in high winds? Well, I was brought up on the coast. So would we shorten the swing? Well, that's a brilliant question, actually, John. If we have the ball in its normal position, we meet it with an optimal amount of loft, and that sends the ball in the air. To lower that loft, we put the ball back in the stance, back here. And so I've now got less loft on the face. So let's take this 3-wood here. Let's say that's got 15 degrees there. If I move the ball back in my stance, it's now got much less, say 10 degrees there. Now, in terms of shortening the swing, no, I wouldn't shorten my backswing, but I'd certainly shorten my follow through. So if I was to hit the ball from this position here, because the ball's further back in the stance, my club shaft is leaning forwards. As I go up to my normal position and then swing down, it's a steeper angle of attack. Therefore, there's more contact with the ground. The club slows down a bit, and a typical follow-through position into the wind is that. We stiffen the arms out and keep the club head and the hands low, and that keeps the ball low. If I want to hit a tennis ball high, what do? I hit it up. I know I've got a lousy tennis action, but you see what I mean? I hit the tennis ball up. When I hit it low, I hit it down. And that effect in the golf swings, if we hit down on the ball here and keep the club low, that's what keeps the ball low and chasing. And again, one of my favourite things that was obviously brought up on the coast. What did Bryson's swing look like? Well, he's running out of arm length, really. I mean, he's so barrel-chested now. And he's done something which I really admire for him. He's gone and done something which is completely beyond what the normal pros doing. And when people say, oh, you know, he's going to do damage to his back, he's an athlete. You look at the damage done to most sportsmen to their body before their mid-30s. He's a pure athlete, that guy, very strong man. He's doing something which is out hitting the field. He's out pacing the field. He had a rotten round yesterday, a couple under, I think it was, compared to 7 under leading. So it just shows it's not all about distance, even on a course like Augusta, which has prided itself on being a distance hitter's course. But Bryson increases the size of the arc of his swing by taking his hands from here at address to here. So he now stands further from the ball. So Ian's question is, what does Bryson DeChambeau's swing look like? DeChambeau works on the principle that the club head should move up and down on more or less the same plane up and down. And that's absolutely fine, because that works for him. His body shape allows for that. There's 2 players who've done it in history. One's a chap called Mo Norman. You've heard me talk about him many times before. And Mo Norman was a savant, but he was highly on the autistic or the Asperger's scale, whichever, I'm not sure what the correct description of him was, but one of the 2. And he stood miles from the ball. He put his hands and arms up here, like that, in a very big position. He instantly gave himself width and space to create a bigger swing. And he was a huge hitter of the ball. So what Bryson does, he stands a long way from the ball, puts his hands very high, and then moves his body. And watch the foot spin, the big thing on Bryson. He does this after every drive now. So what's happening there, direction of force is going that way and that way. Now you imagine if I was going to try and slap something, and I spun that foot out of the way, it's given me, wow, a ton of room to smack into. So as he spins his foot that way, it tells you the force and energy of his swing is going from front to back that way. But Bryson's remarkable. How many times in professional sports does one athlete take themselves to a position which is significantly better than anybody else? They'll have to do something about it. And I'm 47 now, so I've been playing the game for 34, 35 years. I've never known the game be criticised by players and by fans alike, saying it's getting boring, not enjoying this. They're hitting the ball too far. I've never known the game all of a sudden sort of be less enjoyable for people. Now, if they do various curtailments, shorten the length of the driver. Ian's just said there he was experimenting with a 48-inch, now down to 45, and that's quite long. Tiger played 43.5 inches for the most of his career. 1.5 inches on top of that, significant in terms of leverage and the difference in feel and control for these guys. If you then if the driver becomes too long, it becomes unwieldy. They can't control it. So what was my train of thinking then? Faldo said, give the guys no T-peg. Yeah, that'll soon sort things out. Because what Bryson's doing now is using a 5-degree lofted driver and pegging the ball well forward in his stance to try and get some mega distance, which he's getting. So Faldo says shorten the T-peg. Ian Poulter says reduce the length of the driver and increase the loft of the driver, and that will really sort of stifle distance. Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player want the ball to be changed. So there's lots of calls from within the game now to say, look, it's just going too far. It still gives Bryson an advantage. He'll still be the longest player there, but it just doesn't make the game outgrow the length of the great courses. Alrighty, well, I am close to losing battery power now, so thanks ever so much for joining me. I'm on again at 9 o'clock tomorrow, and we're talking about directions of forces in the swing. It's a bit more of a technical session tomorrow. I wish you all well. Stay in touch with me. Any questions, send me an email. I'm very happy to answer them. And I'll see some of you tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and then next week, back in the studio on Tuesdays and Saturdays. So I wish you all well. Thanks ever so much for tuning in, and stay in touch. Plenty of questions. Please send me the questions. They're extremely helpful for me. All the best.